Ambazonia, land of freedom, usually in plenty meets in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty meets in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation.
I'm Dan Toomey, and I'm a community video producer here at LTC, which is Lowell Telecommunication Corporation. I want to extend a welcome to our esteemed panel who are with us here tonight. They will be following up on our recent discussion on the troubling political situation between the English and French-speaking portions of Cameroon. Lowell is one of Massachusetts' largest cities, and it has the historic distinction of being a welcoming community for immigrants the world over. Lowell's African community is a vibrant, diverse, and growing asset to our culture and to our economy, and is held in high regard by both Lowell's general population and by its city government. Lowell has hosted one of the largest African festivals in the United States for the last 17 years. Lowell City Council has designated Bamenda in Cameroon as a sister city in 2002. And the council most recently passed a resolution of support in behalf of the citizens of the English-speaking portion of Cameroon. And that is due to the reported suppression of civil rights that's taking place at this time. Our panel will give us more insight into that and will update us as to the latest news in the ongoing conflict. Our host, LTC's Gloria Politis, who's also a professor of political science at UMass Lowell, will now introduce our guests and lead tonight's discussion.
Hello, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm Gloria Politis of LTC, your host for this evening. And a few weeks ago, LTC did a special program on the crisis in Cameroon. And tonight we are doing a follow-up on that show. And I have three distinguished guests with me here in the studio. Next to me is Dr. John Fobanjong. He was born in Cameroon and educated in the United States. He is currently professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and adjunct professor of African Studies at the United States Naval War College. He and his wife, Antoinette Fobanjong, have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. Next to him is Mr. Fru Nkimbeng, who was born in Mankong, Cameroon. Mr. Nkimbeng holds a degree in economics from the University of Lowell, a master in CIS, Computer Information Systems, from Revere University, and a management certificate from Boston University School of Management. Mr. Nkimbeng is a computer information specialist. In 2002, he facilitated the establishment of a sister city relationship between Lowell and Bamenda in southern Cameroon. He currently serves on the boards of LTC, LCCPS, which is the Lowell Community Charter Public School, and the Lowell General Hospital Patient Family Advisory Council. He and his wife, Ken Nkimbeng, live in Lowell with their 4 wonderful children. And at the end here is Mr. Tabang Kima, who is a native of Cameroon. Mr. Kima holds 2 bachelor degrees in political science and business administration from University of Massachusetts. He has a bachelor's degree in nursing and a master of business administration from Fitchburg State University. He holds a master of liberal arts in government from Harvard University Extension School. He worked as a financial analyst for Pruco Securities and as a registered nurse. Presently, Mr. Kima is an entrepreneur in the healthcare business. Mr. Kima lives in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, with his wife and 4 children. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, so what is going on in Cameroon now? We're looking at basically 3 areas tonight, looking at what's happening with education, with the economy, and with politics. So we'll start with education, and since November of last year, there's been a total boycott of schools in southern Cameroon. It's reported that in September, the boycott is going to continue. So it might seem that school boycotting is counterproductive to a campaign to gain equal rights. What are your thoughts on that?
School boycotting has been a weapon that has been used in other parts of the world to bring about a push to equality and civil rights. In June of 1976, in South Africa, in a town called Soweto, the citizens of South Africa were required to a policy came up and wanted them taught in an Afrikaner, a language that was only used in South Africa. It more or less watered down the quality of education in South Africa. The citizens of the township of Soweto went out, demonstrated, and about 10,000 people on the streets. And they boycotted schools for about 2 years. And finally they prevailed. And today South Africa emerged in 1994 to become a stable democratic society. And even back here in the US, in the 50s, a boycott was used as a weapon in the civil rights movement. Actually, the launching of the modern civil rights movement in America came about as a result of the Montgomery bus boycott. So this is an effective weapon that has been tested and proven all over across the world. Way back, about 240 years ago, a boycott tool was used by Americans at the Boston Tea Party. That exercise where Americans who were craving for freedom and equality and independence boarded a ship and jettisoned tea that was meant for their consumption. That act, that boycott was detrimental to Americans because tea at the time was a staple, the most consumed beverage in the US. But Americans boycotted, went into the ship, took tea and threw it away. And so this is a weapon that has been tested. We know it works, it will work. It is in the interest of our children. And the reason why it's lasted for so long is because the government has refused to come to the bargaining table. It's decided not to sit down and talk with the teachers who are on strike, the lawyers who are on strike. And so this boycott will continue through to September. It will continue till we achieve our independence, Southern Cameroonians. The use of French, the imposition of French on Southern Cameroonians is a direct effort to water down the educational system in Southern Cameroon, a system that was inherited from the British, a legacy very similar to what the British left in India. All of us know that India ranks among the top countries in software development. They had the same foundation that was left in Cameroon. We could have become a major powerhouse in technology development, software development, had the French not imposed, had the French Cameroon regime not imposed its language on us. The idea that you would come and teach kids in a foreign language, in a language that they do not understand, or force the court system to use a language that people do not understand. It's simply not acceptable, and that's why the boycott remains in place to this day.
Well, when people ask me this question, why are we boycotting schools in Cameroon? I said, you don't want them to boycott schools. Where do you want them to go? To go back to schools where students are taught in a language where they cannot communicate with the teacher and the teacher cannot communicate with them. We have examples in history dating back to 84 AD in Britain, when the Roman Empire ruled Britain. And the Emperor de Agricola used this filthy kind of education in order to control the minds of the nation. And the British people said, no, we are boycotting schools. And they boycotted schools for 5 years. That is well documented in the Annals of Tacitus. When the British themselves were ruling Ireland, they instituted a kind of mind control education, an education that emasculates the man and renders the mind useless. A mind that would only accept their enslavement status. The Irish boycotted schools until that changed. The Ghanaians boycotted schools for a different reason, to work for their country. For 2 years, they didn't go to school. They were working in the fields, doing every kind of thing, road work and all that stuff. Boycotting school is not an invention of Southern Cameroons. We are using it because it works. The second thing I have to say is that if we don't use an instrument like this, then we have to use guns. And we don't want guns. We want a peaceful change in our country. We know that the most potent weapon we have is this school boycott. Because if we boycott schools for a whole year, the UNESCO would declare all the certificates in Cameroon invalid because they have not followed the stipulations of UNESCO. If we, a big section, 20% of the population of the country, boycott schools, UNESCO will bring the pressure to bear on the government. So when people say we don't have to boycott schools, I tell them, no, we have to, because that is the most potent, weapon we have against this genocidal regime. So that is what I have to say about the boycotts, and we may talk about that later.
Well, to add on to what everyone have said, I really agree on, but if you are in Cameroon and in the English part of Cameroon, you really ask yourself, what is the need going to school? There are graduates in Cameroon that have degrees, but some of these graduates, they are peddling. They don't have jobs. Poor people have emptied their banks to send kids to school. And these kids come out, there is no work. And this is the only tool that the Southern Cameroonians have against the government. And now the government will want the school resume quickly. And you know why? Because in the English schools, most of the students there, most of the people are children from the ministers, from the Francophone side. And when schools don't reopen, they feel that they are the ones really suffering. Ironically, they want to assimilate and extinguish the English culture. But their children, they don't send their children to the French schools. They send their children over to the English schools. Even the Minister of Information brags that his children are studying here. Are they learning French or they are learning English? And if they can send French teachers over to the English side to come and teach us French, then anyone who has brains should really see the mentality of these people. They want to benefit their envious. They want to take what Cameroon would have used to advance itself, the English language and then the English system of education. So if you could ask an old mother in the village, a poor parent who has scrapped money here and there to send kids to school, at the end, those schools don't produce, they don't produce academicians who can work because there is no work. And ironically, if you come to the English side, there are no industries, there are no companies, there are nothing to work. But if you go over to the French side, there are companies. These kids that the ministers sent to come and study English in the English side, when they go back, they will work. But we from the southern Cameroon, where we even produce 60% of the GDP, we go to school, our school is of no use because they have watered it down. And in the end, they will have nowhere to get jobs. So I think it is, but this is the only tool that the southern Cameroonians have, and the government know that this is a potent tool against them. So they are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that schools resume so that their kids, the privileged kids, should continue to go to school.
Here's another fact. The French language is actually a dying language. It's a language that today in the world as a whole, less than 300 million people speak French. But if you look at the English language, more than 6 billion people speak English. And in today's modern economy, many of the apps that are developed today are developed by young people who went to school, to English schools. Now, in Cameroon, the elite send their kids to English-speaking schools. Then they impose French on Southern Cameroonians, trying to dilute and soetize and make our education system lose that potential that allows and gives the skills that our kids could go on to develop apps and go on to top universities across the world. So we believe that using this boycott, we have leverage on the system because currently the children of the elite cannot come to school to Southern Cameroon now because of the boycott. Usually the president of the country, as much as they impose French on us, his own daughter is actually studying here in the US. And most of the ministers send their kids to English-speaking universities outside of Southern Cameroon. But when they come to Southern Cameroon, they impose French on us and bring teachers that do not speak English to teach our kids. When the kids graduate, they're not fluent in French, they're not fluent in English, and therefore they can't find jobs that could allow them to earn a living.
Let me just add something. The last part of your question was whether the boycott is not counterproductive to equal rights. I would say the boycott would enhance independence of the person in Southern Cameroon. The boycott is what is going to change that country and change it forever, in the sense that when we free ourselves from this mental slavery, when we free ourselves from this kind of colonial educational system that's being imposed on us, we would be better off than the present situation where if you return back to the schools, you still don't have the equal rights as your question demanded. Equal rights in Southern Cameroon can only come if we free ourselves from mental slavery, from that kind of education which Peirce called a murder machine, an educational system which unmans the man, an educational system that emasculates us, that enslaves us, enslaves our mentality. That is when, after achieving that kind of mental emancipation, that is when we can gain equal rights. At this point, we don't have any equal rights. We really don't. So if you stop the boycotts and say, okay, let's go back to school, will you still get the equal rights? The answer is no, we don't have that, because The equal rights have never been there since 1961.
No. Was there other comments? Or?
Well, I was just going to add that what Kima has said is very true. Because in Cameroon, just imagine that the privilege, these ministers who are Francophone, they are sending their children to the English schools. And this is a systematic calculation. Most of, when they graduate, when they get out of schools, jobs that were supposed to be given to English graduates, they are now given to them, and they pose as the Anglophones. So it is a systematic way of actually limiting opportunities for the Anglophones, such that they would tell you that Peter is the one reading news in English, but that Peter is a Francophone who has studied in the English side. So actually, in order to make a level playing field, the Anglophones in the southern Cameroon would really want to stick to the Anglo-Saxon system of education and hope that when this fight is over, there is curriculum. There are intellectuals who are actually working on a system that will revamp the educational system and make it purely Anglo-Saxon the way it used to be.
So now, if this continues for next year, what happens to the future of the young people who are not getting educated for that year, and for the teachers who will not be getting an income because they are not teaching? How do they sustain themselves and their family? Are there any plans to make that sustainable for the youth and the teachers while they go through this period of boycott?
We know it's difficult on them, it's difficult on everyone, it's difficult on parents, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices in order to make conditions better. We could go back to the early 90s. Kids who finished university in Cameroon, southern Cameroon, in the 1990s, many of them are getting ready now to go on retirement, have not received a single paycheck. Why? Because they are English speaking, they are Anglophones. They finish even at the top of their class, they can't find work. And so if we maintain the status quo, we will be condemning the kids that are in college today to the same plight. And so we are hoping that in biting this bullet, we would force the system to grant us our sovereignty so we could work to establish a better system of education for the kids. Actually, there's a committee that's currently working in developing a curriculum that will allow all Southern Cameroonians to hit the ground running once they become independent. And much of what we've lost through this boycott, we're hoping to recapture it. And much of what has been done to us by Yaoundé, of course, we're hoping that we would undo it once we become self-governing.
The question is, what is the future of the youth without education? At this point, the youth don't have a future. Like Dr. Fabanjang just said, there are youths in southern Cameroon who have degrees and they can't find work. I have 4 cousins of mine. 2 of them, I financed their education. And they are hawking cooked food in my village as we speak. I still sustain their living. If they are sick, I'm the one to send money for them to go to the hospital. They have degrees in, one of them has a degree in microbiology, his wife has a degree in biochemistry. These are fields that most of the world needs, but they are not employed. So what is really the future? This kid has been hawking food for the last 10 years. What kind of future has he got? So when people ask a question like this, what is the future of these kids that are not going to school? I ask myself, what future did those who went to school have? So if we don't do this sacrifice at this point, then we are condemning the very kids to a future of poverty and destitution. There is just no way that we can allow the status quo to continue just because boycotting schools will not give them a future. Those who have gone to school don't have a future.
That really, when I get that question, my heart bleeds, because the brain from the English Cameroon is out of the country. Everyone is willing to go back and give their own part, you see, because everyone wants these kids to have a wonderful education. This is 56 years of independence, and we are still saying this. You see, they have been going to school, and we have been complaining about our educational system being watered down. If we don't stand up, at some point in life, you have to be willing to die to be free. But the situation in which education is English Cameroon, as I mentioned earlier, has really been, it is a system to actually destroy these people. And it is the Anglophones, we, the Anglophones, who should fight for ourselves. And just to quote a proverb, it is he who wears the shoe that knows the angle that it pinches. The father in Cameroon, the mother in Cameroon, the uncle in Cameroon who scratches and sends a kid to school, at the end of college, that kid comes back and stays at home. Would you really be happy to see that 50 years down the line, we still go through that? I think that enough is enough. If we sacrifice 1 year or 2 years to make the future brighter, I believe everyone who has worked 56 years till now will say that 1 or 2 years we will be willing to wait for that. And I believe that independence is only around the corner if we don't give up. And I don't think that we will give up.
Doesn't seem like it. No.
The second part of your question was whether the kids will be deprived of education indefinitely. I would say we would not go to school so long as we are not free. There is no use going to a school which is unmanning you. It's to school that you graduate and you have no job, you have no prospects for the future. We will stay at home, we'll keep the kids at home as long as we can in order to attain what we need for the future generation. We are ready to sacrifice for these teachers who are not getting paid. We have adopted programs where people have adopted teachers. Yes. We adopt teachers and we keep them on a kind of stipend. I can't call that a salary. And that is what is sustaining most of the teachers in the private schools and in the private sector. The teachers in the government schools are still receiving their salaries, but the teachers in the private and lay educational institutions are not having any money. And those are the teachers we have adopted and we are financing their living. Although not up to the level that they used to have when they were receiving a salary. But at least we are not letting them go hungry. So if the government is thinking that at some point this struggle will crumble, it will not crumble. Because I have been out there in the field, I have seen the determination, I have seen that the whole thing is intergenerational. The three of us sitting here are over 50 years old, but there are kids that are 25 years old who are deeply, deeply involved in this struggle. So I don't want them to sit there and feel very comfortable that the whole thing will crumble, kids will not have school indefinitely. Yes, they will not have it indefinitely so long as the struggle continues. What is the use of going to a school which is not teaching you what the skills that you are supposed to have? There's just no use. We can't continue that way.
And if I could ask the parent who's in Cameroon now, saying that, oh, you are saying this because you are abroad. Your kids are with you. You don't actually feel we are the ones who are wearing the shoe. But I will ask that parent, you have sacrificed your entire savings. You don't even have something now for the kids. When you look at them, tears come down your cheeks. The kids are crying. For all your life saving, you were hoping that this kid, after school, he will come back and then help you and help the rest. But this kid, he has graduated, he's back, and he's been a burden. Of what use is going to school? When even this school system, they cannot, it's structured in such a way that it eradicates our history. Within 6 months, we have learned a lot about who we are as Anglophones than for the past 50 years that we have been with the French system. So it was systematically, as Kima said, brainwashing the knowledge, making us subservient to them. So that kind of education, I don't think is what we want for the future of English Cameroon, Southern Cameroon.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we did a few weeks ago a show about the conditions and the crisis. Can we get an update before we go on what has happened since then?
Yeah, sure. Southern Cameroonians in the diaspora have come together and established a governing council about a month ago. Elected a chairman who would serve as the head of the governing council, Mr. Sisuku Julius Ayuk Tabe, vice chairman Mr. Wilfred Tassan, and Secretary General Milan Atam. They're all based in Africa, and they're working to mobilize and to put together the diplomatic resources that will allow us to gain our sovereignty. We prefer the peaceful means, the diplomatic means.
And I think that it's a wonderful opportunity that we are sitting here. We really want to congratulate the governing council that is in place to drive this move forward. And it is really, we are really at a critical moment this time. And our viewers will be able to have the opportunity to listen to Mr. Sisi Ayuk Tabe, the elected chairman of the governing council. After his election, he addressed the Cameroonians and spoke powerfully. So you will watch his acceptance speech to lead this struggle.
My fellow Southern Cameroonians, fellow Ambazonians, I am very delighted that you, the people of Southern Cameroon, through your representatives in the various organs that make up the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia Consortium United Front, popularly known as CACUF, and the third conclave of delegates, you unanimously elected me as the chairman of the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia Executive Council. I am also very happy that Mr. Tassan Wilfred and Milan Adam were elected as vice chairman and secretary general respectively to support me in this struggle. We henceforth have the odious task of continuing with the brilliant work that the Secretariat and organs of CACUF have been doing to take our struggle for the restoration of our statehood to a logical end. I thank God Almighty for bringing us this far, and I seize this opportunity to thank the people of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia who have found me worthy to captain this ship. I am filled with humility and gratitude for this divine call to which I say yes. We hear the voices of our people crying out loud from the prison cells. The pain of our daughters that are raped, we feel. The groans of our sons and daughters under torture we endure. The echoes from far beyond of those that have paid the ultimate price with their lives, we hear those echoes. I know the people of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia have been and continue to dream of that moment when we shall move from mere talks and thoughts to reality. That time has come, and we are counting on all of you to get there, to get to Boya.
And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom. You shall live in plenty, meeting our needs. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation.
Well, let's look at the economy. What is the economic situation in the southern Cameroon compared to the French-speaking Cameroon?
I say beyond deplorable, I would say. Beyond deplorable. Southern Cameroon contributes more than 60% to the national GDP, but less than 5% of that comes back to Southern Cameroons. The unemployment rate in Southern Cameroons, particularly the youth unemployment rate, is more than 90%. That's why in the US, you see a lot of Cameroonians who are in the US come from Southern Cameroons because they cannot find work in their country of birth. Some have taken the desperate measures of trying to sail to Europe by sailing across through the Mediterranean. Some sadly get killed, some die, and some manage to get through. When they get through, they get to Europe and they work menial jobs, but the lucky ones end up, of course, here in the US. So the economic conditions, as I said earlier, kids that graduated university in 1993. And why is that year important? 93 is important because it was a year when Cameroon, since becoming independent, organized multi-party elections. In that multi-party elections, the candidate from the opposition party, from the English Cameroon, John Frundi, won the elections. But Yaoundé, with the backing of France, made sure that Frundi was not given power. And since then, Southern Cameroonians, since 93, Southern Cameroonians were blacklisted and denied employment in key industries in Cameroon, including key government ministries. You look at ministries such as education, foreign affairs, defense. The number of Cameroonians in these ministries less than 10%. And so when the buying power, the purchasing power in Southern Cameroon is simply not there. Kids growing up in Southern Cameroon cannot afford to buy land in their town of birth. Why? Because they have no earning power, they have no income. And the marital rate in southern Cameroon has declined tremendously. I would say less than, it's probably half what you find in French-speaking Cameroon. Why get married if you cannot maintain or provide for your family? And so the economy has totally collapsed in southern Cameroon. No roads, hospitals. The hospital that the British left in Cameroon in 1960, one in Bamenda and one in Boya, they've collapsed, and really the quality of treatment that you get in hospitals in southern Cameroon today is worse than what you had in the 60s. And so when you talk about economy, there's really no economy in southern Cameroon. So, no industries, no factories, nothing.
The economy of southern Cameroon is worse. If southern Cameroon at this point was a separate country from La République du Cameroun, it would be one of the poorest country in the world. Not because it doesn't have resources. The resources from southern Cameroon finance, to be exact, 66% of the Cameroonian budget. 66%. We have oil, we have timber, we have other minerals like bauxite in that little territory they call southern Cameroon. We have the biggest agro-industrial complex in southern Cameroon. In fact, in the West Africa, we have the biggest industrial, agro-industrial company in the whole of West Africa. But guess what? The heads of all these corporations, the only oil refinery in Cameroon is in southern Cameroon. Every drop of oil that comes out of Cameroon to a foreign country comes from southern Cameroon. We have everything that can make every country rich. But the question everybody has to ask is, why are the people, the indigenous people of this land that is producing this oil, very poor? The division that most of the oil comes from does not even have a road going there. So the question is why? Why? Because this is systematic colonization. I don't care whether it is white colonization or black colonization, because you get every head of every one of those companies, firms, is a francophone, because you get every bit of every money that comes into as revenue transferred to East Cameroon. The municipal taxes of these companies are paid in East Cameroon. So not even a dime is invested in southern Cameroon, not even a single dime. So this kind of systematic dismantling of the economy of a people will lead to poverty and destitution. And that is why the southern Cameroon economy is far, way behind of that of East Cameroon. If you landed in Douala today and you drove in a car, and when you enter southern Cameroon, you will know that you are in a different country. Why? Because you will see bad roads, you will see poverty. You may see huge plantations, but those plantations are not controlled by them. So we want the world to understand that we are living in bondage. We are living in a situation which is similar to what South Africa, black South Africans used to live, whereby even if the resources are coming from your ground, they are being carted away to the metropolis for for sale overseas or for use inside the other side of the Mongo. Mongo River is the boundary between East and West Cameroon. We'll go into that when we discuss the politics. But economically, we are destitute, we are poor, and ironically, we produce 66% of the budget that finances the whole country. We're only 20% in population, but we produce 66%. This production does not mean that they are taking the human resources from us. No, it's our resources. Our resources account for 66% of the budget.
If I may add, I would say that, English Cameroon was an independent state before the Union. We had banks, we had industries, the infrastructure was good. People who are old and older than me would tell this story. When I used to grow up, my father had a guaranteed job. In Bamenda, you had Power Camp, you had PMO, you have a coffee factory, you have Mideno. In the Southwest, you had a lot of companies. But today, ask yourself whether there is a single company that in the English Cameroon we can be proud of. No. All the banks in the English Cameroon, they were good banks. They were profitable. But all the treasury was taken over to the French Cameroon. If you look at any industry, if there's even any economic warehouse in the English Cameroon, I would say a warehouse because these are just warehouse for storage. The goods are manufactured in the French Cameroon and bring them over to the English Cameroon just for sale. So they make the English Cameroon just only as consumers, not as producers. Just imagine if you cannot produce, and then all the technical schools are not what it used to be, because as we continue to stress on this program, it is a systematic calculation to actually weaken the Anglo-Saxon system in Cameroon, in English Cameroon, so that we are dependent. And at this juncture, I believe every southern Cameroon is willing to die for liberation. Because for 50 years, if you look back, compared to when I was growing up, the schools, we had technical schools, but today, we don't have any schools, we don't have any industries. And then that also ties to the education. Of what importance is the education now that would encourage Southern Cameroonians to go to school when they know that their future is in doubt? Most of them just give up, and most of them are out of the country. We sitting here are examples. We want to go home and contribute and give our own contribution to build that nation. That is why we are here hearing the cries of the people at home who are suffering more than us, that there are many ways that we can come back and build the nation.
So, getting to the politics, who are the key stakeholders in this crisis in Cameroon? What role do you think each can play in trying to come to a successful resolution of this crisis?
Prior to this conflict, the key stakeholders in Cameroon as a whole, you have the French, which continues to see Cameroon as its chasse gardée, as its private reserve. Actually, France calls the shots in Cameroon. The president who is in power today is president because France wanted him to be president. So France is the prime foreign stakeholder in Cameroon today. Internally, Cameroon is a despotic regime. In despotic regimes, you don't find multiple domestic stakeholders. Everybody counts and looks up to the presidents as the sole power broker in the nation. And so internally, therefore, there's just one stakeholder, and it's Paul Biya. Externally, you have France, you have China, you have, to an extent, the US, because the US was counting on Cameroon to fight against Boko Haram. And about 3 years ago, the US government deployed 300 US special forces to work with the Cameroonian government to fight and eliminate Boko Haram. But just recently, it was reported just this week by Amnesty International that with evidence that the military, the Cameroonian military, has been actively abusing and violating human rights and violating the rules of war, and the very tactics, the very abuse that we've had in southern Cameroon. This was actually captured by Amnesty International in video and camera, and so it's on the net, and I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, the American government decided to cut off links with the Cameroonian military. It withdrew its troops. The special forces that were deployed in Cameroon, they've been called back to the US. No more collaboration with the Cameroonian government because of. So that's the way this government operates. The abuses that it's committed against these people in northern Cameroon, the same abuses that they're committing in southern Cameroon, raping school kids, abducting, and kidnapping southern Cameroonians, taking them at night, and you get up in the morning, your husband's disappeared. You don't know who took him, where he went, and abducting judges. As we speak, a Supreme Court judge, Paul Aya, highly respected, highly venerated, a great statesman, he was arrested without a warrant, remains locked up in jail without charge and without trial. That adds to Agwabala, who was an eminent UN legal expert who came back to work in his motherland, and he too arrested simply for calling for the rule of law in Cameroon. There's Niba Fontaine, a university professor, highly respected. He remains locked up without trial and without bail. There's Macho BBC, a young Cameroonian, very entrepreneurial, hardworking, but arrested, locked up without trial, and no charge and no offer for bail. Then Terence Penn, a school principal, vice principal of one of the elite schools in southern Cameroon. Elvis Nyerewi, a young entrepreneur. They all remain locked up without trial, and there is simply nothing that southern Cameroonians have in common with French Cameroon. If you look back, way back, maybe 200-300 years ago, the history of Europe, the French and the British have always been at war. We're always at war. You cannot put a Frenchman and an Englishman in the same house. They will fight and kill each other. Now, they have two very different personalities. We came into this, with the Anglo-Saxon personality, gentlemanly, ladylike. We respect the rule of law, but the French system has no respect for the rule of law. And so when our leaders, when the Paul Ayas, the Agwabalas, the Fontaine, when they call for the rule of law, that's alien to Francophones. They rush in, abduct them without warrant, lock them up. And so that's why we remain steadfast that we have to break away from this regime. We cannot continue to work with a regime that has no respect for freedoms and human rights and the like.
The question is the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? I would say the main stakeholder in Cameroon is France. It's France because Francophone African countries don't have real independence. They have what some people call paper independence or flag independence. They are still controlled by Paris. Their currency is controlled by Paris. Their central banks deposit every dime they have in foreign exchange in Paris, and they have to borrow their own money in order to do anything in their country. The French would have to surrender. We are not begging the French to give us our independence. Independence that is handed over to you is not independence. You have to demand and get your independence. That's what we are doing. They are the stakeholders, yeah, but we are going to extricate ourselves out of their influence, and that must be done. Why must it be done? Because there is no way that we can cohabit with them. The former speaker just talked about the French and the English systems always being in conflict with each other. That is very true. They have no respect for the rule of law. They violate their own laws. Somebody like a Supreme Court judge is thrown into jail and cannot even be charged. The day the Supreme Court was about to give him his habeas corpus, an order came from the presidency that it should not be given. How can a country run that way? The English system of education that we have, or the legal system, the English legal system, which is based on the common law, does not allow such kind of arbitrariness.
I would also like to use this opportunity as a serving member of the LTC to thank this enterprise and the people of Lowell who have stood by us, the Cameroonians, and supported us through this cause. I think that having friends like Lowell makes us feel that we are at home and that we have people who have our back. So again, thank you very much, Lowell, and thank City Hall, and also the crew that have volunteered their time to capture this program. So thank you very much.
And thank you for enlightening us.
Hail this land of glory, we the Amazonians pledge our loyalty. Praises to our Savior who granted us the freedom, and legends to the hero who bought the land we gather. Glory to glory, we rise and never to fall. Here in a nation flowing with earth and holy. Glory, glory, glory to the Father for making you a nation, a joy forevermore. Amazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our need. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation. Amazonia, land of freedom, you shall live